Hi, welcome to today's Paint and Draw Together video. My name is Lela, and today we'll be talking about what to do when you buy your very first watercolor supplies. So this video is for real absolute beginners. You got your supplies, you got home, and now what? What would you do with them if you've never touched watercolors in your life? Hopefully this video will help you and help you to get familiar with the medium, get relaxed, enjoy, and really have the most out of starting to paint in watercolor. So if you watched my previous video, which was all about what to buy as absolute beginner in watercolor painting, then you would know what is here on the table. Now you got all of that, you got home from art supply store, and now what? First and foremost, let's remove what we wouldn't need. This would be artist quality, 100% cotton, high-end watercolor paper. We would not start using that one right away. So let's remove that. We would not be using all brushes either. We would just need one brush. The rest can be put aside and rest. We would need a paint, maybe pencil, if we really want perfect squares, otherwise no. If you got tubes, then you will get small little porcelain plate, open tubes and put various colors around in circle at the top so that you can use the bottom of the porcelain plate to mix your colors. In this case, if you watched my previous video, and I warmly advise to go and watch it, if you got Van Gogh, which is one of the best student grade, or you pampered yourself with one of those, which is Schminke Horadam artist quality paint, then you have a brush, you have paint, you have your mixing area, either in the palette or porcelain plate, and you have your playing ground sketchbook, which is mixed media or watercolor sketchbook. And now we are ready to go. Now you will open the very first page. In this case, for me, will be one of those halfway through, and take a water container, glass, plastic, whatever you have. It's easier if it's glass or porcelain, and fill it with water. The very first thing you would need to do with your brushes is to wash that glue residue which you have on the brush. All brushes will come quite stiff when you buy them, and have plastic protector or not, but you can't use them like that. So don't rush and try to bend that brush and destroy it. First and foremost, remove that protective glue so that you can actually use that brush. And the way to do that is to dip it in the water and lightly touch the walls, and then once it absorbs a little bit of water, use your fingers and try to soften that glue all around. And then repeat that. It's going to take probably 5 minutes or longer until you completely dissolve that glue, which is water soluble, and then come to the clean brush. It's advisable to use at the end soap and wash it under running water so that there is no glue left in the brush when you're using it to paint, because that glue will interfere with watercolor paint and could leave stains and undesirable behavior. So that's the very first thing to do. Get your brush at a stage where you can use it, because it always comes with that protective glue all around it. The next is, you got your container. Now you rush to the kitchen and you get a few of those napkins. They're quite nice because they don't disintegrate underwater, and they can absorb very quickly a lot of water and be perfect to control amount of water on your brush. However, get two because you would need one of them to place it on the paper so that you rest your hand on it and not touch paper with your hand. The reason being is there are some, in the skin we have oil and impurities which could contaminate the paper. And then when you try to paint, the paper could resist watercolor. So that's why always put something under your hand when you're resting your hand on that watercolor paper. The other one will be used simply as a blotting paper so that we can control amount of moisture on our brush. And now we have paint here, we have paper, we have napkins, and we have container with water. And we are ready to go. Now, before we start, I will point into a few things, a few areas which you should not be doing when you are just starting to paint and starting to use your watercolor paint. You might have seen online that some artists prefer to take spray bottle and then spray their paint, and now it's all fluffy and nice and moist and ready to use. Don't do it. The reason being is that this paint, it's artist quality paint. It's already perfectly formulated to get perfectly dissolved under slightest moisture in the brush. And if you apply this spray all over, all what's going to happen is you're going to dissolve large quantity of the paint, and it is going to flow from one to another pen and cause mess. So don't do that. The next, what should not be done is when you are to start using the paint for your very first brush stroke, you should not dip your brush in the water, get the water, and start dissolving as much as you can and pretty much digging up as much of the paint as you can and trying to make your first color swatch. That's pointless because this is, again, highly concentrated watercolor paint. A little goes a long way. And in order to make it last the most it can so that you get the best value, but also in order to speed up your painting and save you from constantly replacing your water and washing your brush because it's going to be too much of that paint, it is best to go easy and go with a small amount of paint at the beginning and add on as you need to. Now, how to use watercolor paint. We take the brush, we dip that clean brush in the water, and watercolor brush is capable of holding decent amount of moisture. It's not the same like acrylic or oil painting brush, which isn't. And it's pretty soft. And it is going to be able to bounce back. Once we bend it, good brush will bounce back. And that is the property of watercolor brush. It can hold moisture. It has flexibility to bounce back once we bend it, and it is capable to discharge that water or watercolor paint when it touches the paper in very controlled manner. So we'll dip the brush, take some amount of water on it, and then go into the very first paint which we would like to test here. If I start here, that is cadmium yellow light, and I dissolve some amount of it, and I want to see how that color looks like. I will touch the paper, go back and forth, and move my hand so that I can create color swatch and deposit all that paint on the paper. As you can see, as I go further, the amount of paint I have in the brush is almost negligible. That way I created gradated wash of that cadmium yellow light paint. It's the strongest where I started and the lightest where I finished. And now looking at it, I know what this paint is capable of. And I can conclude that even in the strongest area, it is still very light. It doesn't and can't go all the way to black, which would be the darkest value. It's probably just slightly lighter than white, which probably will be value 2. The rest is even less than that. I can also observe that this paint is not granulating. And let me explain that concept right away at the beginning, because it is one of very important concepts to get familiar with as watercolor artist when you're starting. All those pigments used to produce watercolor paint have different working properties. Some of them have very small particles, which are capable to get easily dispersed and capable to penetrate quite deep inside the pores of the paper, making that paint how artists often have tendency to call it staining, which means it gets deep inside the pores of the paper, particles are small, it hides itself, and after that it's not easy to lift it. Certain pigments are notorious for that. They are great, they are amazing artist pigments, but it's very important to know that they will always do it, which usually happens with some of the light transparent yellow pigments, and then phthalo blue will do it, phthalo green will always do it, and earth pigments, which are on this side, which are iron oxide synthetic or natural pigments, will not do it. Their particles are quite heavy and quite large, and they will not be staining to that extent. They will be more granulating than staining. So your paint here can have a few properties. First, it can be transparent or opaque, which is self-explanatory. Second, it could be transparent and usually staining, and on the other side could be granulating. So to repeat again, could be transparent or opaque, and could be staining or granulating. What is the difference? What is the definition on each of them? That's important also to know that transparent paint will allow for layers which are under to shine through because it is transparent. When you apply one layer at the top of another, at the top of another, all layers under will shine through the top layers, and eventual color hue will be combination of all those layers which optically got blended. If the paint is opaque, that will be present in much smaller extent. The paint will create opaque layer, and then the next layer of paint which will come after it, if it's transparent, that one will shine through. If it's opaque, it will cover what's underneath. When it comes to staining versus granulating pigments, we would be able to know that based on the behavior of the paint itself, especially in wet into wet application. So let's move on with testing our colors and figuring out what they are, because when you just got them, you don't have any idea how they behave. So if I take my next color here and I have no idea what it is, and I want to know how it behaves on the paper, I will again repeat the same. And if I run out of water by some time here, I can always go back, dip, and continue, and see how that looks like. And again, create that gradated wash. As I move on, I would be able to know exactly what each of those colors has in terms of color hue and its working properties. Very often you will see, especially with artist quality paint, that when it's dried, it looks almost black like this. But when you put it on the paper, it looks completely different. That's why it's highly advisable to create color chart like this. So when you come home, you get your set, cut yourself nice piece of watercolor paper, make small little divider squares so that you know which one is which, and write down what each of those paints is and what pigment content is, and then go and create those swatches in the same way as I'm making them here. That way, when you place this here and have it together with your watercolor set, you will always know that this paint here, which looks completely black, is actually ultramarine blue. And when you pick it, this is the color you will get. Here it's black and it does look black. So you're technically looking at this here, but picking that paint from here, knowing how it's going to look like when you take it. Now, if we want to test if this paint here is granulating or not granulating, the best way to test that is to create first wet swatch on the paper. So you take your brush, you pick some water, and you make sure that that paper is wet. Now you take your brush and let's pick the paint which has some amount of granulation, which is this sepia. Not anything awfully strong, but still. And if you dab that paint on the brush, from the brush on the paper, and allow it to disperse, as it disperses, the particles of the pigment have tendency to clump together and create non-uniform color distribution. And that is a property of granulating pigment. So when you're starting and looking at your palette, you have no idea which one is which. On every tube, manufacturers usually place what is transparent and what is opaque color, but they don't place what is granulating or non-granulating. Let me find what is that sign on this Van Gogh. Maybe they don't have it here. Apparently they don't have it here, but good number of paints does have which one is transparent and which one is opaque or semi-transparent. Anyway, you can always find that out by experimenting. If you are completely new to watercolor, then for you this exercise at the beginning will be very valuable, because you would know how that paint behaves when it's placed on the wet paper and how it behaves. In this case, for example, if I take this sepia and I apply it completely on dry paper, you will see that I can create pretty flat wash just because I force paint not to move much. Here it has wet areas, so it would travel by itself, and if it is granulating, will clump and create non-uniform color distribution. If it is staining, such as for example phthalo blue or phthalo green, you will see the difference. You apply wet paint, wet, just water on the paper. Okay, that's good, nice, moist, saturated. And now you dip your brush, take some water, and we go into this phthalo blue paint. Phthalo blue is very strong color, and if you are to use it in your watercolor painting, I always advise to actually place it here and know how strong that color is in your brush, because if you are painting something light and you dip your brush into any of those strong pigments and go right into paper, 9 out of 10 cases you will actually deposit too much paint and probably ruin your painting. It is always good to just dab it here, disperse nicely, and then go on your paper. Now if I place this paint here on this paper, which is phthalo blue, even though it looks as if it's granulating, when it dries, it's going to nicely flow and will actually exhibit properties of staining transparent paint. The particles are very small and they will be traveling quite far away. Of course, anytime you apply paint, you take it from the pan slightly, because just touching that paint will actually take a lot of paint. And if I go with wet brush on dry paper, which is the case where I have the most control, and just drag it, I will create very smooth and gradual wash off from the strongest to the lightest color. And that way I would know how that paint behaves. As you can see here, as it dries and disperses itself, it becomes completely flat, which means it is transparent and it's not opaque and it's not granulating. So that's how we learn about every single paint we have, and that skill and understanding and knowledge will be invaluable when you actually start painting real painting, because the real knowledge accumulation starts here, not at the moment when you start creating your first painting. This is much more important to know and practice and acquire as a knowledge as beginner than making your very first painting right away as soon as you got your art supplies. Another thing which is also important to understand is what each of those colors is capable of in terms of how light or how dark it can be. If you usually start from lemon yellow, orange, mid-red, then there will be some pink hue, magenta hue, then there will be blue, 1 or 2, green, 1 or 2, and then probably some earth tones at the end, like this yellow ochre, burnt sienna, sepia, and black. Each of them is capable of going dark up to a certain point, but not all the way through, except black. For example, this lemon yellow is pretty light. It probably, if I say 1 is white, 10 is black, will be able to go up to 2. This one probably like 2.5, and red will be darker, ultramarine would be darker, probably would be able to go all the way up to 5 or 6. If I take the most concentrated paint, that will be probably there. And then if I want to make it lighter, I will add more water and make it lighter. If I want to make it even more light, I will add more water, dipping, and create even lighter hue, and all the way till the end. If I want to control amount of moisture on my brush, I will take napkin, dab it here, deposit extra, and then have less of it if I want to have very fine lines and control how they look like. When it comes to dark colors, sepia and black, of course, the value I can achieve by using black will be the darkest, which will be pretty much 10 out of 10. But if I add more water, I can make lighter values. So if I dip my brush in the water, which will dilute it, then I can create much lighter value. As a general rule, or one of those best practices, it's always good to take your paint and not go directly on the paper. Disperse it nicely on your palette or porcelain plate and see how strong it is. Do you want something darker, lighter? Add either paint, or if you want lighter, add some amount of water until you obtain the value you're happy with, and only then go and create your swatch or play with that color. Getting familiar what each color looks like is paramount, because this here will be your best friend when it comes to mixing colors and choosing what to do with each of them, because that way you would know how they look like, and when it comes to color mixing, you would know what would be suitable to mix with another color to obtain the hue you would like to have. Another thing, if you buy paint in tubes, it's important to put them in a certain order so that you go from lemon yellow to mid yellow to medium red, then pink, then violet. Then after that you can enter blue hues like ultramarine, which has a red shade, and then phthalo blue, which has green shade to it, and then greens, which could be one or two. The most famous and known and versatile being phthalo green, pigment green 7, which combined with any yellow will give all kinds of greens. And if some amount of red is added to that green, it will create very natural and beautiful spring or summer greens. After that, you can have all kinds of different hues depending on the preference. In this case, this set came with a few of earth pigments: yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and sepia. And finally, you have the darkest color on the palette, which sometimes is Payne's gray, sometimes it's black. Payne's gray is actually a combination of a few pigments. Usually it is ultramarine blue, then magenta, and phthalo green. Those three will create pretty neutral black, and it's very beautiful mixing color with any other color because it creates very clean mixtures. If you attempt to mix colors as a beginner, the simplest rule to remember is that if you mix two colors which are very close in this arrangement, they will still create very vibrant and pleasing color. Any of those, like if I mix those two, will be some kind of middle yellow. If I mix those two, will be some kind of orange red. If I mix red and violet, I'm going to get magenta. I'm going to get some kind of middle violet red. If I mix violet and ultramarine, I'm going to get darker violet. Those two blues will create some sort of middle blue, neither red, neither yellow. And then phthalo blue and phthalo green will create bluish green. those two will create darker version of green. Now, from here on is a separate world. Those are muted colors. So this yellow ochre is muted yellow. It's not as vibrant and strong as this, but it's one of the most light, fast yellows out there. Burnt sienna, again, is combined color, which is natural iron oxide. In this case, they added black to it. Otherwise, it's just single pigment. And then this sepia is also mix. It's not single color. As you can see here, it has phthalo blue. It has here probably burnt sienna or burnt umber, and then black. And eventually here is black, single pigment, pigment blank 9, which is ivory black. If you go back and look at those two colors, you will see that this one is really transparent and very smooth, while this one here is granulating. It has patches of color which clump together and create this unique texture, which is great to play with. Now, as a first exercise, I would recommend to go and create your value scale out of all those pigments. For example, if I want to create value scale out of sepia, I will go and take that paint and then go and create the darkest version of it I possibly can. Then dip my brush and get a lighter version of it. And then dip my brush and create another lighter version of it. And play with that to see how far I can go with every paint I have. You can go back, take a little more paint, and just dab it, deposit it there, get darker value. And play with how to obtain the exact darkness you're after, with intention to create gradually lighter hue. Even though this practice might look silly, it's actually extremely valuable, because that's exactly what you will be doing in the real painting, adjusting. If it's too light, you will add more color to it. If it is too dark, you might even choose to lift some color out of it. And that way, you will gain that confidence that you can achieve the exact value you're after. Now, when you play with the colors, they are very strong, some of them very staining. Your brush will contain a fair amount of it. It's always good after you use certain color, for example, phthalo blue here, which is very staining and strong. If I take that brush and go and take this yellow, I am going to permanently ruin it for quite some time. It will take a lot to actually clean that yellow. So after using that color, any color actually, go here and wash your brush before you decide to pick next color. Now my brush is clean and I can go and pick this yellow without fear that I'm going to contaminate that yellow with the blue, because if I went with the blue and right away picked the yellow, I would have created here in this yellow paint this mixed color, which is actually green. And then it will be very hard to clean that yellow and bring it back to this beautiful, clean, pristine yellow. That's the case with all other paints. Even if you need to mix two of them, you know, I want to mix, for example, this red here and this yellow. I'm not going to go from red into yellow right away to get that mixture. I am first going to deposit this red here as much as I can, and then clean my brush completely in water so that there is no red in it anymore, and then go and pick this yellow. And now I can start from here and then slowly incorporate this red. If I'm happy with that color there, I would not go and take more of that red. I'm creating color trail. Here I have yellow, here I have light orange, and if I want even darker orange, I can create another patch here which will be darker. And now I have here 4 colors to choose from. I have yellow, light orange, darker red orange, and total red. And if I'm to paint, I can certainly pick any of them as I like. This one happened to be what I eventually got on the brush. But if I need to go and take yellow, for example, I will just wash what I have, take that yellow, and apply just that. Or if I need another like this, I will take that one and apply that one. That way it's all separated. We don't have mess here, which is mixed colors without any definition. Especially if you decide to paint realistic paintings. The true color is very important, and creating soft transitions from one color into another is very important. And having various traces of various combinations of colors on your palette is also very important, because that way you would be able to pick exactly the hue which you have here, which is pre-mixed, and go and paint exactly that area which has that hue, and then next to it have another one which is going to be a different color. So hopefully this is all helpful for you, and hopefully now you have courage to take that watercolor supplies you bought 5 years ago and you never touched because you're afraid to touch it, or the one which you just got yesterday because you watched my video and you got inspired to get out and buy some, and now you're playing with it without any fear. And that playing will last forever. Even I still play, because this is, for example, watercolor paint I just mixed yesterday from Pure Pigment. It's called Violet Red, and I know nothing about it, how it will behave, what kind of working properties it has. And as soon as I mix new pigment, which isn't really available in commercial art supply packs like this, then I want to know everything about it. For example, here is exactly what I've done. Exactly what I described to you so far. I tested all kinds of possible color applications. Color on the wet paper, color on the dry paper, small little shapes just to see how it behaves, a lot of color, less color, a lot of water, less water. And I can certainly conclude that this violet red is combination of a few hues, black and some reddish and some kind of burnt sienna hue, and it is granulating because it does create various textures on the paper where clumps of the pigments come together and create that. And it does have various variations. It has component of black, component of red, component on yellow, and so on. So I hope you got something out of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. And I hope now you are equipped to go and try using your watercolor supplies which you have. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day and see you in the next video.